And there is also, if you have a mother who's emotionally immature, who's narcissistic, who's going to be abusive in some way or toxic in another way, that causes deep wounds. But if it was in any other relationship in your life, if you described it to anybody, if you were describing a best friend or a partner, people would be like, run, go. The minute you say it's your mother, no, you're just expected to endure it. And it's because there's these phrases that come up, isn't there? Like, you only have one mother. Your mother gave birth to you. You owe her. But why do we, as the child, owe the parent for them giving birth and taking care of us? That's a minimal expectation as a parent. When you choose to give birth or adopt, you commit to the child, not the other way around. And to expect that child to meet your mental health, emotional, and even, to an extent, some physical needs, if you're putting that parentification onto them, that parenting role, you're going to cause harm to that child.
Geraldine, oh my gosh, welcome to Curveball. I'm so excited to have you coming in from, tell people where you're coming in from.
From Leeds.
Leeds, yeah. It's like 9 p.m. So I really give you so much credit because...
It's actually 8 p.m. because where we are, well, I'm in England, but everywhere in England and Britain at this time of year, our clocks change, and they literally did this weekend. So it's now 8 p.m.
Oh, okay. Ours will be changing next weekend. Arbitrarily. I used to think that daylight savings time had something to do with, seriously, our relationship. I don't even know. I didn't know that it was just created in the 1950s so people could farm later in the day. Like,
it's just for farmers.
They make summer days last longer. I thought it was something like really scientific. And then they're like, no. And then a lot of people, like, it's the most car accidents in the world happen like during that transition too. So it's, why do we have, I don't know. It's just a funny. So I'm glad to know that America is not the only country that has like a weird tradition or tries to control.
All sorts of havoc when you're trying to do this kind of thing. Like, which time zone? Where are we? Yeah.
And then we have some states in America that just don't even switch at all. And then that messes up if you have recurring meetings with clients. And I know that that's like a high class problem, but I do think it's funny when the government is trying to literally control time. I'm like, it's like they're trying to control the weather. It's like, okay, good one, politicians. All right. Yeah. So Geraldine, tell me a little bit about what you do and who you work with and how you help them.
So I'm a serene spiritual hypnotherapist and coach, and I mentor. And what I do is I work with people who have deep wounds, but I specialize in people who those deep wounds have been caused by their relationship with their mother. And I help by using hypnosis and coaching to explore different spiritual ideas, but also to connect them with their own spirituality, with their point of connection within them that connects them to a loving, divine energy, source, universe, God, whatever word you want to use, that's fine. But it's about connecting with a point of peace and wisdom, strength and love within yourself, because quite often the women I support have not experienced unconditional love, or have certainly not from the person they would expect it from the most. So it's about helping them heal by bringing that to themselves. But we also do inner child work, explore past life regression. There's all sorts of different ways you can work spiritually with hypnosis, and I help people connect with their spirit guides if that's something they're interested in, chakra cleansing, all this kind of stuff that just helps them to feel more peaceful. That's the aim.
One of my favorite words, serene. Like that. Oh, and then you just said, like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Can I just, like, if I'm ever on the ledge, can I just call you? You can take me off the ledge, like, immediately. Yeah. I just love that word, serene. Why do you think the people's relationships, we were talking a little bit before we started the show, like relationships with moms are complex. Like, what is it about our relationship with our moms that sometimes can really turn us upside down as an adult?
There's different layers to it, and there's different reasons. Sometimes it can be depending on what your mum's had to deal with in the past. If she had to parent you through addiction, through trauma, through an abusive relationship, she may not have been able to give you what she needed to protect you and nurture you. And quite often there is a mother wound that is passed down. Now, Bethany Webster is the woman to go and listen to around that. And that's that generational wound that's been passed down from mother to daughter, mother to daughter, mother to daughter. And it's that, we're kind of expected as women in most cultures in the world to sacrifice who we are to become a mother, to give up our job or identity. And that creates a weight that's heavy and can cause deep wounds. And a lot of mothers have, rather than healed that wound and protect their daughters from it, they simply pass it on and then expect that from their daughters. And there is also, if you have a mother who's emotionally mature, who's narcissistic, who's going to be abusive in some way or toxic in another way, that causes deep wounds. But if it was in any other relationship in your life, if you described it to anybody, if you were describing a best friend or a partner, people would be like, run, go. The minute you say it's your mother, no, you're just expected to endure it. And it's because there's these phrases that come up, isn't there? Like, you only have one mother. Your mother gave birth to you. You owe her. But why do we, as the child, owe the parent for them giving birth and taking care of us? That's a minimal expectation as a parent. When you choose to give birth or adopt, you commit to the child, not the other way around. And to expect that child to meet your mental health, emotional, and even, to an extent, some physical needs, if you're putting that parentification onto them, that parenting role, you're going to cause harm to that child.
That is so interesting how you describe sort of that conditional relationship, because I know that even in the most well-adjusted parents, we create, I like to see how I just put myself right into that category, well-adjusted parents, but that, because I'm like, I'm going to manifest that. But I've tried so hard. Like, one of the things, I grew up in a really big family. And so there was just a lot going on. And there was sort of like one emotion you could have, which was happy. And if you weren't happy, that sort of like disrupted the system. And so you sort of learn these like strange coping skills around that. So I remember just feeling, even before I had children, I was like, I'm going to always let my children own their emotions. So if they're feeling sad or afraid, so I sort of knew that having one emotion wasn't, but I'm positive I've created conditional environments, clean out your sink after you brush your teeth, because that makes me happy. What's an example of something that would be an example of sometimes like that really inner child, or that deep wound that you have that comes from that kind of relationship you have with your mom?
I was just going to,
because I'm sure my husband said once, he's like, what do you think our shortcomings as parents are? And I'm like, oh, I hate to think about that. And of course I could ask my kids, they're 28 and 24, but I'm like, I don't want to ask them yet.
It's one thing I just wanted to just go back to something you were saying. I will answer that in a sec, but you were talking about your parents you were only really accepted if you were happy. So it sounds to me like that's a really good example of emotionally immature parents. Emotionally immature parents can be, they put a roof over your head, they attend your ball games, they make sure you're dressed and fed, and can seem from the outside to say and do all the right things. But if they are not emotionally equipped to hold a safe space for your emotions, it can mean then you become only acceptable in certain conditions, like you said, that conditional relationship. And that is a real clear sign of having an emotionally immature parent, that they are just not equipped to hold space for your emotions. So they kind of push them away, like they almost ignore it, sometimes may punish it. That's the more severe side. But most of the time it's just I can't deal with that, so I'm going to look in this direction.
Right.
Yeah.
And what's so interesting is when you say that, even because it's really resonant, but I do feel like this part of me saying, I want to defend also my parents. Like, that's so interesting. Even though everything you said is true, I do feel like, what is that? That is like that lizard brain, that connection I have to like
it's written into your DNA to crave your parents. You need your parents to survive. There's a really wonderful book that's come out with Hay House by Kelly McDaniel, which is called Mother Hunger. And that's that. And this is not just talking about relationships where the mother is toxic, abusive, or very unhealthy. This is all sorts of relationships where you haven't received a nurturing mother, maybe because of grief or all sorts of reasons. But she's saying that we all need a mothering presence in our lives that brings nurturing, protection, and guidance. And that's where we naturally crave that, because we need our mothers to survive, literally, as children.
Right.
So if we don't get our mother's approval or unconditional love, we will do everything we can to get it, because that's the only way we survive. But the thing is that programming, that craving, that need that's built into us as human beings doesn't go away just because you grow up. So it's to say something negative about your parents or acknowledge something negative about your parents physically hurts. It's deeply painful to realize your parents have not been that protective, nurturing guidance in your life. You're having to acknowledge that they're causing you harm. It hurts, and it's very hard to face, but if you want to break the cycle with your own children or with the loved ones around you, it's the only way. You have to get to a point of acceptance.
Wow. I don't know why. I almost feel like I could start to cry right now. That is such a huge piece of insight. So tell me about, so you had sort of a curveball with your own mom where you really realized. So talk to me a little bit about your relationship with your mom, because it also really informed the work that you do too. So so talk to people who are just, because again, I do think you're really onto something when you say that. I had interviewed somebody last week for Curveball who had postpartum rage, which I'd never heard of. And she said, I felt so bad because I felt like I was this bad mom, and that was the worst possible thing you could be. And I just thought, why it is such a sacred relationship. And I think, we have some physiological things going on. And then we also have societal narratives, which is, honor. You think about like even the difference between Mother's Day and Father's Day in the US, at least. It's like Mother's Day, it's like pamper your mother. Like you do all these nice things for your mother. But for Father's Day, it's like, leave your dad alone. Like give him, like, it's so funny. It's like, so there is like this societal stuff. And I know that we're raised. Yeah. And I know I'm so interested in this idea of karma and everything. So anyways, keep on going and tell me about your relationship with your mom and what you did.
When I was younger, we were incredibly close. And I thought that was just really deep emotional connection. But I'd become her carer when I was 12. And she had not just physical issues, but mental health issues. So I would be helping her wash, helping her eat, but I would also be helping her to calm down when her emotions got too much. So she was hitting herself around the head, or I took scissors off her when she was trying to cut herself. And
and you're like in grade 7?
Well, I wouldn't know American grades, but I was 12.
Yeah.
I just started what we call high school. Oh no, I was at middle school. So yeah, it was an incredible amount of pressure, but I would be put on a pedestal as, look what everything you do for me, aren't you amazing? And then if I didn't bring her a glass of water when I got myself one, oh, you're a bad carer, and I'd be knocked off the pedestal. If I had lots of friends come over and see me when I was a little bit older, and we'd be laughing and stuff upstairs, and then they'd all leave, well, how dare you not involve me? All I can hear is you laughing upstairs. Instead of her kind of loving the fact that I'm getting some time out, it was all about her. And she wasn't getting what she wanted. And so as I got older and as a teenager wanted a little bit of a life of my own and tried to get a little bit of separation, she wanted this deeply enmeshed relationship where she was the center of my universe. And the more and more I pulled away from that, the harder harsher the relationship got. Then I moved to London to be with my now husband when I was training to be, I just qualified as a probation officer, and it got even worse. She was ringing me several times a day. If I didn't answer the phone, she was scream at me. You know, there was awful guilt trips. I should never have let you go. I'm too ill. I shouldn't have let you go. And it was this, she saw me as an extension of herself. She showed this ownership over me. And the more I tried to pull away, the harsher it got. And then there's the whole triangulation and isolation, telling my grandparents negative things about me, isolating from my father, you know, painting him to be somebody he wasn't. And so it gets extremely lonely. And it's very hard because we had been very close. And when she wasn't in fear and anger, she could be really good fun. So I would crave that person. So you keep going, keep trying, because I think, well, if I'm just a better daughter, if I just do this right, maybe I'll get that mother back that I miss so much. But in fact, it just got worse. And then when I finished working as a probation officer, I worked for a while in addiction, but I moved to working in domestic abuse. So working with the survivors around their emotional recovery. And it's a job I loved very much. But by doing that, I started to understand the real nuances of different forms that harm and abuse can take. And a lot of them were very, very familiar. And right at the same time, I was becoming a mum myself. My daughter was autistic and we were going through all that kind of stuff. And I was also seeing a counsellor. So it was a perfect storm. And it was at that point, before I cut contact, there was a couple of years before, I remember my counsellor saying to me, how come you're not furious with her? You should be furious. And you just keep defending her. And that was enough for me to just go, okay, my perspective of reality is completely distorted. And I literally remember sitting on the floor in my house and just the room spinning around me. Like my whole perception of the world was shifted. But it wasn't until a couple of years later that I lost my job working within the charity, and anxiety just went crazy. My daughter, we were battling to get her a diagnosis and support. And my relationship with my mum was deteriorating rapidly. And I went back to the counsellor, and she just said, what would life look like without her in it? And at first I was just like, no, I love her. I can't do that. She's like, okay, but we're going to have to put some firmer boundaries in here. You're not coping. Christmas was just coming up, and my mother-in-law was coming to stay. My mother-in-law and my mum didn't get on very well, but my mum was supposed to be staying as well. And I couldn't face spending Christmas with, I was just not well enough. I was not well enough. I was struggling to eat, to dress. I wasn't functioning. And so I said to my mum, can you not come to me for Christmas? There was other options. And she was a grown woman. You know, I couldn't be responsible for everything. I needed to get well and be as well as I could for my children on that day.
Right.
Her response, screaming. She screamed. And at no point was there you're in need, I'm gonna back away and give you the space you need. Or there was no acknowledgement of my needs whatsoever. A lot of paranoid stuff was coming out. And it was just like, do you know what? I'm really grateful she did that, because it allowed a switch to go off in my brain that was just like, no more, enough is enough. I'm not doing this anymore. I just realized I was swimming in poison. Like I couldn't get well while I still had this around me. And that's when I cut contact.
I remember I had a relationship like that with my dad, who was an active alcoholic when he was married to my mom, and then they divorced, and then he got sober, but was a dry drunk. And so I remember just going to starting to go to Al-Anon meetings, which was really helpful. But I was listening, the Sinead O'Connor album, All That You Can't Leave Behind, was out. And I just listened to that like constantly on repeat. And there's this one song that I remember just because I remember sort of getting to this place of like acceptance of my dad, but just also there's this line, like cause more harm. You're more of a problem than you're dead than you did when you were alive. And I remember just thinking like, and I know my dad was still alive, but I remember just hearing that song, just thinking, it's not healthy. Like our relationship is so not healthy. And so I had 7 years where I did not have any communication with him. And I was like, if he just, even acknowledged, that we had a rough relationship, that would change things so completely. And so, but he did end up doing that 7 years later. Like I ended up having a relationship with him, believe it or not, but I was ready and set. And I was not going to put myself back in that situation. And I know you pay a price for that too, because when you're the one taking yourself out of the dysfunction, everyone who's in the system is just like, oh, ugh. And then it becomes super like intense too, to do that when you really have to pick sometimes your own, your own mind, like your own life, and
and it's not even like, I was very blessed actually that my mum's family kind of took my side. They didn't particularly, they just took that opportunity to get space from her as well.
Right.
And my maternal grandmother, really, she had my back. She had my back all the way until she died. And so I was really lucky that I didn't
Nana's for the win, right? Like, I feel like I experienced unconditional love through my grandmother, my mom's mom too.
Oh, yeah. Both my grandparents were just beautiful. But, I think they would probably acknowledge maybe they didn't get some of their parenting right.
Right.
I know.
Like, I know that same feeling. Like my sister and I were talking, like, I love my mom, but my mom, like, there were some things that were complicated about her. And I just wonder, like, what was her life like? We sort of expect I remember my daughter posted something. She has a picture of me like when I was 3 years old. And she's like, before she was my mom, she was just a girl, like, which is sort of hit me in one of those perspectives. My mom was just a girl. She's just a human being doing the best she can possibly do. And even if it was not like sufficient, or, it wasn't, or what, whatever it was.
It's it's funny because I get people comment, I get trolled a lot. No surprises there. And I get people who comment, well, maybe the mother's just carrying wounds. Of course she's carrying wounds. Of course that's why she is the way. Most of the time, when you can go through all the explanations of why your mother may behave that way, it'll come down to pain and fear.
Right.
However, that doesn't mean that you keep taking what they're handing out. That's their responsibility to heal.
Right.
That's not your responsibility to heal that. You can't fix that for them. Only they can do that. And that, to me, what makes the difference between a relationship that's causing you harm, but a relationship that's toxic. Because any mother can cause their child harm. I know I've done things with my children that I regret. However, the difference is if you, as the mother, are willing to hold space for them to talk to you about that. If you're willing to back off if they need you to give space, are you willing to take responsibility? Are you willing to acknowledge that any harm, because my mother would never acknowledge that she caused any harm. None of it was ever her fault. She wouldn't take any responsibility. And certainly would not give me the space when I put those boundaries in place to say, please don't ring me 5-6 times a day, allow me to have my own space and my own personality and perspective, particularly perspective. If I took a different perspective of an argument or a family event to hers, my God, it was a deep betrayal. So I wasn't allowed to have my own personality almost. And if you're not allowed that space, that becomes deeply toxic. You can't grow, you can't heal, and that's a real problem.
Yeah, because you're literally living in your head. And I know what it's like too, when you give, looking back, you said your mom had mental illness. So I'm sure, my dad had alcoholism. So he would do some crazy things. And I'd be like, well, he was just drinking, and now he doesn't, so I would give him the benefit of the doubt, and sort of literally jump over anything that I felt like I would. And that's,
it's lovely to acknowledge.
You get trained to doing it. Yeah.
We acknowledge, and that's part of the healing, is to acknowledge the pain your parents are, acknowledge the they're human, acknowledge they're doing the best they can with the understanding that they've got at the time. That's all fine. It's not about blaming them, but it's about it's about truly acknowledging the harm it has caused you so you can heal it. If you're not willing to, if you can't feel it, you can't heal it. You've got to acknowledge and accept that it's caused you pain.
If you can't, can you tell me more? And wait, I got to write this down. If you can't feel it,
you can't heal it.
You can't heal it. Okay, I don't think I've ever heard that. I love this.
So one thing that's really important.
More about that.
Yeah, when you work, like one of the main ways I work with people is I coach, and it's hypnotherapy. And I always say I make people cry for a living, because people tend to be with me for a little while and the tears come, and that's great, because that means they're feeling it. It means we're going to start healing it. And hypnosis, one of the things that's really powerful to do is to regress to those painful events, or to regress and connect with the inner child, and those emotions that had to be held in to keep you safe. Not being able to shout at your mother, not being able to say, leave me alone, not being able to run. I went to being 12 years old and watching my mother hitting herself around the head, and I froze at that moment. I didn't know what to do, but I didn't dare leave her because she might do something worse. And at that moment, I buried my inner child. I had to stop being a child at that moment. I had to become the adult. And there was so much emotion that little 12-year-old me needed. She was terrified. She was angry. She was hurt. She felt lost. All that needed to be out and expressed. And I tell you, that was one hell of a hypnotherapy session. Went on for hours. Just releasing emotion. But that's where the healing comes. Releasing it, expressing it, getting it out in a safe space.
Right. And I actually heard something. The tears that you cry when you have that kind of emotional, literally like emotional and energetic release, it's like it has like some magic in it, that it actually has this residual effect, that when you release it, you have like equal amounts of dopamine or serotonin or something. So you feel this when you have a really good cry, how you just feel, oh, I really needed that. Like
it's so good for you crying. It helps the body to release so much stuff. It helps you to reset. Like, I work with lots of women who, when I first start working with them, don't cry, because if they cried as a child, they were either dismissed, ignored, or punished. I had clients who were beaten when they cried. So they don't, they hold on to it because it's not safe. And so it's my job to create a safest place as possible for those emotions to come out. And for some that takes a few minutes, for some that takes years. And that's okay. It's working their way at their pace. Most important thing is giving them that safe space that's free of any judgment. Sometimes I'll have a client come out and say something about their parent, their mother, and they go, oh, that's such an awful thing to say. No, it's just a thought that came, you verbalized it, it's gone. If you took action on it, maybe that's another thing, but you're just expressing your feelings, and this is your safe place to do that.
And you're supposed to have this. I remember I saw a therapist, and he was like, we have this attachment to our family of origin. And he's like, and it's a strong attachment, physiological lizard brain. And then we have our family of creation. And so often, and I was able to really understand, because I have a really big family and I'm closer with some of my siblings than I am with others. And I used to feel bad about that. But then I'm just, if we all had this spiritual contract too, like that's what I think too, is like we have these spiritual contracts, like soul contracts, and also shadow contracts. And why wouldn't we have soul and shadow contracts sometimes with the same person, or just like soul contracts and shadow contracts? Like anytime I think about, my parents, like our spiritual form, and they're just like, okay, we want to have a ton of kids. We want to totally experience addiction in all its different forms. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I will totally be your daughter in that scenario, And so it just sort of helps to really give it purpose or just give it meaning or something like that. I'm like,
it's a conversation that I have with my clients, but you have to choose your moment, because sometimes that's too painful to hear.
Tell me more about that, choosing your
experience moment. That, you've got to you've got to choose your moment to share that where it will actually bring healing, because if sometimes you do that too soon, it's too painful. So, but I
get that.
I do think it gives it some purpose that you chose your parents because there's something your soul needed to learn, and they were the best people to teach you that. And quite often our best teachers are the ones who cause us the most pain. And it's quite a hard thing to understand, but it's also to understand that when we as souls learn in our human experience, that learning that we do expands the universe. It brings learning to the whole universe. So that thing that you're going through is not just
you are blowing my mind.
It's massive.
Tell me more about that. Wait, just because we have the thought, we're introducing it. Okay, wait a second. I literally have goosebumps. You have so many mic drop moments. So when we have a thought, like a healing thought like that, like we choose the moment, we have this healing thought, the universe is forever changed because that thought is now in the universe.
It's, if you think about when we see awful things happen in the world, you see people in war zones there's things that's going on this planet right now that break my heart. However, I know that those souls have come, and quite often when it's really big, really traumatic stuff, we tend to come in groups to experience it, which is why you get like big genocide events, is because those souls, it's too much to handle on your own, so they kind of experience it as a group. But I know that they are souls that have chosen to come and do some very deep learning that will expand the universe. It will enable the universe. And there's also those souls that have come here to lift the consciousness of the world. Now, when we're seeing that awful, painful stuff that's happening in other parts of the world, sometimes, especially as sensitive souls, and pretty much every woman I work with is highly sensitive, we feel that pain. We see it. I mean, it's awful. The stuff we're seeing in Gaza at the minute absolutely tears me to pieces. However, I know by me sitting watching it and dwelling in it and crying and being weighed down and not being able to function is not serving them. I am not helping them. I honor their soul for choosing to experience that and go through that, but that doesn't take away from the pain they're experiencing as a human experience. That's still awful. But if I can see that there is some purpose in that, it gives me that little ability to, one, be very grateful, but to be able to step back instead of acting out of anger or reactiveness. It gives me that pause to be able to step back into love and react, and not react, but respond. There's a big difference between reaction and responding. And I'm much more able to respond and do something out of love. So that's instead, and by doing that as well, by being the best I can be, by loving myself as deeply and honoring who I am and bringing more light and love into the world, that lifts the consciousness, and that will benefit them on the other side of the planet. That will help them. It might not help them right in that moment. It's not our job to work all the fine detail out, but it's trusting that the best way you can benefit the world is by looking after yourself. And my favorite metaphor for this is the lighthouse. So I will always say to any woman I work with, aim to be the lighthouse. So let me grab 1 second. Always have.
Oh my gosh, I love it. You have props. I love it.
I always have props. I'm a very visual person. So, important thing, to be a lighthouse, you have to have really firm foundations. So know who you are, not who you've been told you are by anybody else. Know you're a divine being. Know who you are as a person. Then you have really strong boundaries. You hold your boundaries strong. So you're taking care of yourself. And boundaries to me have to be physical, emotional, and spiritual. You look after yourself on all those levels. And then you take care of your energy. So your light can shine really bright. So you protect your energy. You make sure you're not giving it away to those who are not giving it back in some form or are not worthy of it. So like your children might not always give it back. You have some days where it's just hard, but they're worthy of it. You might have an elderly relative who's got dementia and it's exhausting to be around them, but they're worthy of that. But you don't give away your very precious energy to people who mistreat you and cause you harm and make you feel less than. So it's taking care of that energy so your light shines really bright. And that light then guides other people their way home. But what you mustn't do, which is a lot of sensitive people, especially if they're carrying mother wounds, they will carry a sense of responsibility for other people's well-being. And often there's a little bit of ego thinking they know what's best for other people too, because they've taken care of people. They think they know what's best. So you need to let go of that. And but it's what can happen is they start getting into everybody else's boats and trying to steer their boats and steer them the way they think, whether it's children, friends, colleagues, start trying to steer everybody else's boat. And the problem that causes is, one, you're taking their boat in a direction they might not be meant to go in. This is their learning experience. But also by doing that, your light all that time, because all your energy is going on in the boats, this light's dimming, which then means that there's much less light in the world. So instead of steering everybody else's boats, let people find their own way. You shine really bright, and that light will aid them in finding their own way and empowering them to learn their own stuff.
That's the honor of the journey. Like I remember once when I was really going through understanding alcoholism and with my dad, and being in Al-Anon. And I just remember somebody saying, don't deny anyone of their rock bottom. Meaning that's how people and you obviously don't want people to hit a rock bottom, but I realized how I was just always trying to rescue people all the time because I had a good track record of rescuing. So it's sort of what I did. But then you deny someone the magnitude of their own experience then, so
you don't know what them hitting that rock bottom is going to, you don't know what that's going to inspire them or cause them to learn and then bring to the world. You don't know where that's going to take them. There's some of the best spiritual teachers, most inspirational, wonderful people we see in the world bringing light to the world have usually been through some really dark stuff. Like a spirit, when I quite often do readings for people, and when I get a reading and I see a rose, I know that they need to understand that they're going, and mind my language here, but they're going to have to go through some shit for that rose to grow, because roses grow from the nastiest manure. And it's realizing the most beautiful roses grow from the nastiest manure. So often the most incredible people have grown from some of the worst situations. And we have to let people experience that for themselves. We cannot protect them from it. Because sometimes when you try and protect them, you just make them go on a longer, more painful journey than they actually needed to.
Well, I think that's such a good lesson really in compassion, which is something that I didn't really understand completely until I actually saw it in action, and I love compassion because you don't have to fix anyone. You can just say, tell me what's going on, and you just listen. And then I'm like, how can I help? And that's all you have to do. And then be committed to helping that person when they're asking for help. But that it is I was at a retreat once where my friend who was running it, she's a very cool Buddhist, and Buddhists they are tough sometimes. They have really, really good boundaries though. And so there was a woman in this retreat. We're in Costa Rica, huge, hard to get to place. This woman came from the UK and she was profoundly deaf. And so, people were doing the best, she could read lips, but there were people from around the world, we're talking in a microphone. So the sound is weird. And when music would play, forget about it. She was just so completely lost. And so the second day of the retreat, she said, this is more than I thought it was going to be. And I'm thinking about leaving. And so I think what I would have been inclined to do is to say, oh, no, don't leave. We're going to make all these changes for you. I would have tried to convince her to leave. And my friend Monique, who was running this retreat, said, okay, hey, look, if you want to leave, I totally understand. If you want to come and go, you can come and go. Whatever you decide to do, I will tell you that as every time you're in this room, I will do my level best to support you the very best I can. And it was literally like, I was like, wow, that's compassion, because she was there for it. She wasn't trying to fix her. So this woman ended up staying the whole time, which was amazing, because because I saw compassion in action. And I just think my son has anxiety, and sometimes he calls me like he comes in hot. And as a mom, I want to fix things, right? So now I'm just like, I'll just say, tell me everything, so he can tell me everything. And then I'm like, how can I help you? And sometimes he's just like, you know what? I just really needed to vent. Like, so that's been a big change too, is like, that's compassion in action. So I'm so curious, because we talked about boundaries, and it's one thing to have a boundary and articulate it, but it's another thing to actually honor the boundaries. So you had mentioned it has to be physical, emotional, and spiritual. So what is like a boundary 101 for people to try? Like if they're really thinking like, you know what, my mom sounds like her mom, and I really want to that sounds great when she's like, don't ring me like 7 times a day. So how do you say this, and then how do you actually do it?
There's something to be really careful of with boundaries, because if you are dealing with somebody who's narcissistic, what you must not do, and quite often with emotionally immature as well, is tell them the boundary, because they will do everything to push against it. You must not tell them the boundary. It will trigger off it, particularly with emotionally immature. It can be this real fear of rejection, this fear of not being good enough is actually, there's their own fears that you're hitting on. So don't tell them. With a narcissist, they're much more likely to turn it against you and make it as if you're a terrible person for holding such a boundary with them.
Right.
So don't tell them. So I had a boundary with my mom that I would stay on the phone for no more than 20 minutes. And my husband would shout me, or something would come up with the kid, so that was a boundary I held. I tried to keep them much shorter. Sometimes worked better than others, but it was a boundary I kept for myself. Sure. I never told her that, because that would have caused her pain, and she'd have turned it against me.
Right. It would have created conflict.
Yeah, and that just wouldn't have served anyone. But when I talk about boundaries, the most important boundary is self-love. If you're really loving and honoring yourself, you will naturally take the right boundaries for yourself, and you will start repelling those people who are not good for you. So self-love really is the key. It's not really about holding other people at a distance. It's about really holding in your space, knowing that you are worthy of having peace to yourself. I'm writing a book at the minute, which is called "You Do Not Owe Your Mother Your Peace." You have a right to hold the space for that. But the way I work with it is on 3 levels. So physical is just doing simple things like keeping phone calls shorter, maybe keeping visits to once a week, once a month, once a year, if that's what works for you, and knowing that you have a right to do that. It may be that you don't spend time with your mum in your house. It might feel too much of an invasion when she's in your house. It might be that it feels very difficult being in her house. The energy in her house might feel so heavy and tiring. It doesn't work. So you meet somewhere neutral. So there's these physical boundaries you can put into place, like you may limit the contact with your children, or it might be your husband doesn't deal well with it, or you make sure you've always got someone with you when you're with her. That can be a really useful one. Don't go and see her on your own. Take somebody with you, because that can just buffer some of the stuff for you. Emotional boundaries is really about that, really honoring your needs, is knowing that you have that right to hold these boundaries, that you are a human being too, who deserves to be happy and healthy. And if spending that extra time with her is costing you that energy, is making your lighthouse dim, you have a right to do what you can do to get your lighthouse shining again. And actually, anybody who really loves you, truly loves you, wants your lighthouse shining as bright. And if they are not doing what to support you to light your lighthouse, then that's not properly love. Which is hard to say, but it's not. That is not unconditional love. So it's being very aware of who supports your lighthouse and who's trying to dim it, and keeping really aware of that. Spiritual boundaries is much more about being aware that you are an energetic being, and doing what you can. So when you're highly sensitive, which if you've experienced a lot of those difficulties as a child, it's likely you will be, because you have to be very sensitive to people's moods to know how to behave to keep yourself safe. If you're that sensitive, it means you can walk into a room and you feel people's emotions, and people who are energy vampires, like most narcissists,
right,
they will draw on that energy. So you've got to make sure that you're doing what you can to protect it. Now, different people do it in different ways. The way I teach the people I work with is to imagine being in a pyramid. So literally, as soon as you wake up in the morning, before you go and encounter somebody like that, if you're seeing your mum, you imagine a pyramid coming around you. You let it come around you in whatever way feels right. You can climb into it, let it come down over you, whatever, doesn't matter. And you trust your imagination to let that pyramid be made of whatever it needs to be made of that day. So some days it might be wrought iron, some days it might be double glazed glass, some days it might be just a lovely fine meshing because you're with your best mate and you don't need it.
Right.
So it's being aware of just this pyramid around you, and any unwanted energy is just bouncing off the outside, and you're lovely and safe inside. And it's making sure you do that before you're around these people. And I always love to surround my pyramid with gold, silver and white light, because that's what my spiritual teacher taught me. And then I imagine a star at the top of my pyramid, and that's my connection point to divine energy. Play with it, do it your way, but it's making sure you are doing things like that. And then before you go and see somebody who drains your energy, makes your lighthouse dim, do something to kind of top that energy up as much as you can, so that rather than depleting from here, they're depleting from here. Does that make sense? So you've got much more energy for them to deplete from. Then when you come away from them, do something again to up that energy. It's going, feeding your soul through a walk, seeing a good friend, putting music on that you love, whatever it is for you that gives you that emotional energy. You do it beforehand and you do it afterwards as well.
Amazing. Yeah. Just a little planning too. Like one of the things that I did once with my stepdad, who I've had some like things with, and I remember sort of having this moment where we were going to have this, like it was going to be a big moment, and I sort of knew it. And I just remember saying to like my inner spirit or whatever it was, I was just like, when you look at him, you have to look at, I want my inner spirit to see his inner spirit. And what was so interesting is when I looked at him, because I'm all this like other stuff is not his inner spirit. And what was so interesting is I looked at him and I looked at him right in the eyeballs, and I was just, holy crap. I don't think I've looked at him in like 20 years, where I really could. I was just, I was almost like shocked. But I get that. I love, you give beautiful analogies. The pyramid. I want my pyramid to be totally tricked out like your pyramid, because it's just going in and protecting yourself with a visual metaphor. Oh my God, that's just so powerful. And then the lighthouse, I think, is also so profound. Physical, emotional, and spiritual boundaries. I think my biggest takeaway is you do not have to tell people your boundaries. It can be your own. But that's how you rewrite your story. And that's how
the boundaries aren't for them, they're for you. You're the one who holds that boundary. If you're expecting them to hold it,
oh my gosh, stop it. You are on fire. Oh my God. You are absolutely amazing. Okay, so Geraldine, how can people learn more about you? You said you have an amazing ebook that you want to share with people, and we'll put all the links and everything in the show notes. But tell me a little bit more. If people are boundary curious.
My ebook's coming out soon. It's that's called Breaking Free from Your Mum, and that's understanding and healing from a toxic relationship with your mum. And that's just kind of an introduction to my work. It's a way of just starting to understand, because it's almost like I have a rolling program called the Serene Way, which takes you through understanding, but then it takes you through stillness, emotions, reconnection, energy, and the now and empowerment. So that's my Serene Way. It's my healing pathway that I take people through. And that's
what does that say? Now I now realize that it spells serene. So it's stillness, energy. Yes. What is it?
It's stillness, energy, reconnection. Oh no, sorry. Start again.
Yes.
Stillness, emotions, reconnection, energy, now, and empowerment.
Oh my gosh. I love this because one of the things so I had an issue with my brain that we did not know what was happening for a while. And then it just turned out I had a ruptured aneurysm. But there was quite a few months of uncertainty. And one of the things that I decided to do, and this was again based on, advice from someone on my support team, which was, how do they heal like brains if you were in the hospital? They put you in a medically induced coma. So how can you get as close to medically induced coma in your regular life as possible? And my energy was so completely different when this aneurysm was active, which I didn't even know you could have I thought if you had an aneurysm that you just like drop dead, like right there immediately. But no, that's not the case. And so I had to go up against this, just this, we're both entrepreneurs. So you sort of feel like this hustle culture. I was at a mastermind meeting and all these people were like, this is when I knew I was going to have brain surgery, but I didn't know when or really what it was going to entail. And so they were like, what are you going to do before your surgery? And I'm like, nothing. I'm going to be still. And so I called it like still life. Like it was an intentional decision I had to make to be still. And then I had friends who joined in with me, which was amazing because I had an extenuating circumstance. I had like a brain issue. They just did it because they just wanted to support me. And so we all did it together, which was stillness is fun with friends. But I will tell you, in that stillness, it is now like a regular practice of mine to have like
it's
planned stillness in my day because you get the best, you get the best ideas, you get so much more done with like less energy, less stress. Like I feel so much clarity. I don't know. I just think stillness is so underrated. So I love that Serene starts with stillness.
Stillness is the key to that inner connection. Like if you're not still and if you're not in the present moment, you can't hear your own intuition, your own inner wisdom. And that's why if you've ever been in an abusive, particularly a narcissistic relationship of any kind, that person will want you never still. They will keep you exhausted, they will keep you overthinking, and they will keep you questioning yourself. Because if you're still, you will connect to that inner wisdom and you will find power. And they do not want that. But that's one of the first things I want to teach the people I connect with is you have the power to heal. I'm just your guide. I'm not doing this for you. You're doing it.
Of course, I feel like that 90s song. You got the power. You got the power. Sorry. Like, sorry to take this profound moment and reduce it to like that. We got the power. But that's exactly what I feel like too. Yeah. And I know you like to sing along to musical numbers in your kitchen too. I know that's one of your fun facts.
I love it. I do too. When I teach stillness, there is silence. That's a form of stillness, but another form of stillness is play, which Brené Brown says is doing something that serves no purpose other than it nourishes you, and it's that finding those things that when you do it, your conscious, noisy mind shuts up, and you just let go. So for me, it's singing and dancing around the room, painting. When I paint, you can see this is my painting behind me, and this one here in my painting.
I love this.
And it just allows me to let go. For my husband, it's gardening. Like that's his thing. For some people,
I'm a gardener too. Yeah.
We have.
So I have a great quote.
Go on.
Oh, sorry. I have a great quote that will blow. I hope it blows your mind. So I hope I can return the mind-blowing favor. So listen to this. Anxiety is thought without control. Flow is control without thought. Mm-hmm. I was like, oh my God. Exactly. Yeah. I know that's like a James Clear. I know, but it's good. What if I said, I made this up? You're like, no, you didn't. It's James Clear from Atomic Habits. But that's like an amazing quote. I love that.
Yeah. And there's a lot of that. If you have ever looked into 3 principles, that's a really good spiritual approach, which is from the inside out, not the outside in, that we're creating our experience of the world through our thinking. And Michael Neal's written a really wonderful book called The Inside Out Understanding, and there's a lot in there around that. If you listen to Dr. Wayne Dyer's stuff, he'll guide you.
Oh yeah, I love Wayne Dyer. Yeah.
So this is why during lockdown I just read and read and read and read and read, and I just soaked in all these different spiritual teachers. But it's realizing that Wayne Dyer, Michael Singer, Eckhart Tolle, they're all talking about the same stuff. They're just coming at it from a different angle.
Right.
But all of it is that we are divine
exactly.
beings. We have this point of peace within us, and when we connect to it, when we get really still, when we get really present, magic happens. But also really
and it's the truth.
healing happens. Yeah.
I feel like I had an IV, an oxygen tank. Like, just, I feel so refreshed, and I feel so really inspired to set some boundaries, keep it my little secret. But I love this too. Like, yeah, exactly. You really gave me some really novel and different ways of thinking about things that people talk about all the time, especially around the different kinds of boundaries: physical, emotional, spiritual. Choose your moment. Are you kidding me? And then you can't feel it. If you can't feel it, you can't heal it. I swear to God, like, my guests make so many amazing like sound bites. I'm like, I'm going to create like laptop stickers or bumper stickers from with like the amazing things you guys say, because that's so true. And I think my big takeaway is going to be choose your moment, because that's like, so I just want to thank you so much. People, Geraldine Crane, all her information is going to be in the show notes. Check her out. Serene spiritual hypnotherapist. She's going to make your lighthouse shine like the sunshine. Geraldine, thank you from the bottom of my heart for being on Curveball.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.